Good morning on this Wednesday, May the 5th, 2021. Let it be known we have an amazing show for you this morning. We are having an amazing day lined up for the Black press as a whole. But what is cancel culture? And why are certain brands being canceled? Well, we will talk with multicultural marketing and communications expert Courtney Newell this morning. But first, let us bring on our president and CEO, Dr. Ben Chavis. Good morning, Dr. Chavis.
Good morning, Stacy. And on behalf of Karen Carter Richards, our distinguished chair of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, our executive committee, and our entire board of directors, and all of our 230 African-American owned newspapers who are members of the NNP, we welcome everybody once again to Let It Be Known for the Black Press of America.
Absolutely. And our headlines this morning, Dr. Chavis, before schools closed during the pandemic, people like Ayanna Johnson worried every time she dropped her daughters off at school. Johnson is a Black woman, and she told a local television outlet that racism is rampant in her predominantly white Georgia town. At her daughter's school, a student once used racial slurs and told another child he doesn't play with, quote, brown people. She says teachers are quick to punish or reprimand Black children, and Ku Klux Klan flyers can be found in mailboxes. As schools reopen across the country, many Black parents reportedly are finding an otherwise hidden benefit to remote learning, being better able to shield their children from racism in classrooms. The new report revealed that white students have been far more likely to be back in the classroom, with 52% of white fourth graders receiving full-time in-person instructions in February, the latest month, with results available from surveys that were presented by the Biden administration. By contrast, less than a third of Black and Hispanic fourth graders were back at school full-time, along with just 15% of Asians. Even before the pandemic, concerns about racially hostile environments contributed to large numbers of Black parents turning to homeschooling, according to many educators. So, Dr. Chavis, we have another looming situation as kids prepare to go back to school in the fall.
Absolutely. And one of the things that the pandemic has exposed, which many of us in the African American community already knew before the pandemic, is that racism is systemic. It is systemic in law enforcement. It's systemic in the judiciary. It's systemic in the educational system. It's systemic in the healthcare system. It's across the board. And I think the Biden-Harris administration has a big challenge, but, they're making progress. We in the Black press, we continue to lift these contradictions up. I think not that we always want to focus on what is wrong, but we want to focus on how we need to continue to push for freedom, justice, and equality. We can't stand still. Even during this pandemic, we got to make sure that our children are not exposed to that kind of systemic and institutionalized racism.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dr. Chavis, as the pace of the U.S. vaccination slows down a bit, President Biden announced a shift in federal strategy on Tuesday afternoon, away from mass vaccination sites to smaller, more local settings, in an attempt to boost the campaign to get more shots in the arms. We know in his first 100 days, he exceeded his expectation, his goal of having more than 100 million vaccinated. He's well on his way. The country is well on its way to having 200 million vaccinated. But the president said that he is directing tens of thousands of pharmacies to offer walk-in appointments for coronavirus vaccine shots, creating more pop-up and mobile clinics, and shipping more doses to urban communities and clinics, all aimed at vaccinating 70% of American adults, at least partially, by July 4th. And we know many states have said they're going to reopen by July 1st. The federal government has also decided that if states do not order their full allocation of doses in any given week, the supply can be shipped to other states that want more. States previously were able to carry over to the following week doses that were available to them, but they did not order. This afternoon, Dr. Chavis, at 2:15, as you well know, the publishers and journalists of the National Newspaper Publishers Association will have a special briefing from the White House COVID-19 Health Equity Task Force members, Drs. Marcella Nunez-Smith and Dr. Cameron Bell. We look forward to that. Dr. Chavis, this afternoon, it'll be broadcast right here and on other NMPA and Black Press of America outlets.
Absolutely. And that's 2:15 Eastern Time, 2:15 p.m. Eastern Time today. We hope all of our listeners will join us to get this vital information from Dr. Nunez Smith and from Dr. Cameron Webb.
I said Bell, and that's
okay, no problem.
He has a partner named Bell, but he is Cameron Webb, as Dr. Chavis. Thanks for correcting that. But this morning, Dr. Chavis, as we said at the top, what is cancel culture? We hear it so much. Well, as a diverse woman, multicultural marketing and communications expert, Courtney Newell has an exceptional understanding of the immediate challenges that business leaders face when fostering diversity and acceptance within their organization. She is the founder and CEO of Crowned Marketing and Communications, an award-winning creative agency that provides strategic multimedia marketing and PR solutions for global brands, government agencies, and small to mid-sized businesses. Let us welcome this morning, Courtney Newell.
Good morning.
Good morning,
Courtney.
Dr. Chavis. Stacy, thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Courtney, let's jump right in. Talk to us about cancel culture.
Well, cancel culture really is all around the premise of if you're not using your platform in a way that really represents your stakeholders, all your diverse stakeholders, it really is an opportunity for your brands to let their voices be heard in the form of canceling you. So what really is happening right now that we're seeing an influx of is if brands if they have tone deaf messaging, if their messaging isn't inclusive, if their internal operations are in disarray, especially when it comes to elevating their diverse leaders and their diverse workforce, people are canceling them. People are saying, we're not going to support this brand anymore. I know I loved this brand for so many years, but this brand is no longer in alignment with who I am today and the things that I need in order to support the brands. So that's really, in a nutshell, what cancel culture represents.
Yeah, and Courtney, we know that there was a situation a couple of years ago in Philadelphia with Starbucks. And then last month, I believe it was, in California, there was another situation. Talk to us about that. I know you have spoken loud about that.
Yeah, it was when it happened last year, it was one of those things. And that wasn't actually the first time. That was actually the second time. And so now we're seeing it again. And what is really troubling is that their stakeholders, before you would think of it as, we are a minority, but really multicultural audiences, we're really needing to start thinking about how we're going to market to a multicultural and make inclusion a part of the company DNA. And when we do that, we will see less of these discriminations, this discriminatory behavior that's happening. And Starbucks, we're all very disappointed because the world is watching. They already were canceled essentially. And now people are really saying, we know that you tried to make amends. They took the days off. They closed all of their Starbucks nationwide and had that diversity and inclusion training. But did it really move the needle? Maybe for a short period of time, but it really has to be baked into their DNA because the occurrence that happened last month is unacceptable and cannot be allowed and should not be tolerated.
Yeah, and so Courtney, before we go further, talk to us about Crown Marketing and Communications. How did you start that? And tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so I actually started the company 10 years ago with $500 that I won being crowned in a local Miss America scholarship pageant. And since then, we've grown to now serve predominant, or mostly, I'll say, majority of the Fortune 1000, really helping them to be able to create or increase their market share within multicultural audiences. And a lot of the work that we've been doing in the last 18 to 24 months has really been around internal communications, because we've seen that brands can have great external communications when it comes to marketing to multicultural audiences. But a lot of times internally, there's a lot of disarray. There are people who don't feel connected with the brand. There's a lot of pay discrepancy when it comes to the pay between Black and non-Black members of the team. So we've been doing a lot of internal work, but predominantly we work with large companies to really help them be able to create a multicultural strategy that helps bring them into the future. and thinking about their brands for the next 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah, and Courtney, Dr. Chavis is down in Florida, and watching this morning is our publisher down in Fort Lauderdale from the West Side Gazette, Bobby Henry. Dr. Chavis, I'm going to throw it over to you. Jump in.
Yes. Courtney, where's your company based? What city?
We're in West Palm Beach, but we do work nationally.
Very good. The reason why I asked that, because, the browning of America is accelerated.
Yeah.
The Children's Defense Fund has reported now that the majority of the children under 18 today in 2021 are all communities of color, families of color, people of color, persons of color. And I think that your company is going to have a great potential, because all these companies are not doing what they're supposed to do in terms of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Particularly on the equity question. And so tell us what the prospects are in your view, since you work with a lot of these companies. Is the pendulum moving in the right direction, or are you still running into systemic barriers to celebrating more diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, Dr. Chavis, I think what's going on right now is brands are finally, it was like last year was this great awakening, and brands are finally, the brands that knew, and it wasn't something that wasn't known, right? Like we've known for years based on the census, we've known that that America is shifting from a minority majority to one that is really going to be very diverse. Millennials and Gen Z are getting more diverse. And like you said, America is becoming more brown. And so brands are aware of that now. And I think last year was really the great awakening for that. So the work that we're really focused on doing is to help make sure that as they become more inclusive, that the messaging both internally and externally isn't tone deaf. I mean, we've been working with brands in the past, 3-4 months around Stop Asian Hate and those sort of communications and messaging. And a lot of brands are getting it wrong internally, and they're posting and sharing messaging that is very tone deaf and is offensive to those who identify as Asian American. So, it's really important to make sure that the work is being done, but it's being done in a way that is not pushing you backwards. I think that it's great to celebrate the efforts, but it really has to have a strategy. And while I applaud them for doing the work, there's so much work to be done still.
Yeah, I just one follow up. Thank you, Courtney. A lot of brothers and sisters in the African American community, we're the Black press of America, so we are the trusted voice of Black American expressions that they fear multicultural, multiracial. They think that that'll dilute African American interests. Can you talk about, from your perspective, that it may be the opposite, that the extent to which that persons of color work together is the extent to which we can really tackle the problems of systemic racism. But if they divide us, if the forces of oppression divide people of color, in other words, juxtapose, have us fighting one another, then we never can have the unity to deal with the root problem, which is white supremacy and white racism. So can you talk to us about building multicultural coalitions so that mutual interests are not only identified, but addressed?
Yeah, so Dr. Chavis, I think it's really all around making sure that every voice is heard. And I think that was really what was the issue. There was a lack of transparency. There was a lack of respect when it comes to Black voices. And so when the country really woke up last year, or the reawakening, we can even say, it was really just supporting the overall mission and message that Black Lives Matter. And we're seeing that message not be diluted. I think that it's being promoted across all races. Mm-hmm. And it's really something that I believe is changing the narrative of what true inclusion means. People are now having conversations inside of these large organizations that would have never happened before. We just saw recently Louis Vuitton or LVMH just made a post and statement about how Black Lives Matter. And so we wouldn't have ever expected that, especially coming from a French company. So I think that as we, as society, really connect and grow together and really focus on how we're going to push the narrative forward and making sure that inclusion becomes not just something that's trending, because some people have said, is this just a trending topic, or is this something that's going to really be here to stay? And I believe the latter. I believe it's here to stay. I think that it really does depend on making sure that every voice is heard, but making sure that while we focus on inclusion not as a whole, but also really inclusion, making sure that each group is heard and each group is elevated respectfully.
That's a great answer. Thank you so much. That's so important for our listening audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And excuse me, Courtney, you mentioned earlier about starting your business with $500 that you won from a beauty contest, a pageant. What was it that you said, I'm going to take this? Many people, including myself, I probably would have took it and bought some clothes or something. I mean, what was it that you must have had something in mind prior to that, to have a long range plan, and talk to us about that and the importance of a long range plan.
Yeah, I think that when I started the company, I had been working in different roles at my university, Florida International University, go Panthers. I was working in different capacities within different student organizations. So I was the marketing coordinator for one of the largest student organizations. I was managing a $2 million marketing and PR budget. So it was basically like running my own business. And honestly, I had tried to, at that point, I was in my last semester at FIU and was really looking for employment. I could not find anything, Stacy. So I said, you know what? I need some funds. I need some funds to start this money. I need some money to start this business. And there was this one pageant. I had my eye set on it. I'm from Palm Beach, and I really wanted this title for a lot of different reasons. I wanted it, one, to win the funds to be able to start the company, but I also wanted it to be for me, being someone who was bullied and not believing in myself at a younger age, it really was a full circle moment for me. So that plays a huge part in why I call the company Crowned. But I really had already seen the ability and the market that was there. And I realized that it wasn't going to be something that I could go and join a company and get a position. It just wasn't an option at the time. I graduated during a recession. And so I just saw it and I thought, hey, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it now. And it ended up working out. And I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah, well, excellent. And you mentioned graduating during a recession. Well, folks now are graduating during a pandemic. And so they're facing a lot of similar challenges, correct? And so what do you say to them? Because many, as you just laid out, your path, many have that path, especially the young ones. Dr. Chavis talks about it a lot, the millennials, the Generation Zs. They are starting their own business. They're making their own way. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I manage a team of all millennial, all Gen Z. So, and a lot of the work that we've been doing prior to the work that we really started focusing on in 2020 was around making sure that that companies, larger companies and smaller companies, knew how to manage multi-generational, because their Gen Z millennials think very different than their bosses a lot of the times. So I think that it's really important. And I think the reason why Gen Z millennials are really focused on starting their own businesses or having side jobs and things like that is really, for a really long time, we've seen our parents, we've seen grandparents work for a company for years and years only to be terminated right before they would get their pension. And so I think that we've learned those lessons, we've seen those lessons. And so we just really want to be able to set ourselves up for success and not put all of our eggs in one basket, I would say.
Yeah, I think Dr. Chavis will concur that this newer generation and the millennials are really making it happen out there. We see even during the Black Lives Matter demonstrations, and they're leading the way. The voting in Georgia, you had, of course, the women, but a lot of young ones was there leading the way. So we see exactly where you're coming from. So what's next for Courtney?
Man, I think sky's the limit, right? So I wrote this book, Future Proof, last year. It became a bestseller within the first week. I'm writing another book this year, so that's coming out. And I just hope to continue to do the great work of really making sure that we highlight and elevate multicultural voices, and that we really create psychologically and culturally safe workplaces for everyone going forward.
Yeah, and so culturally and safe workspaces. We talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, right? So what really is diversity and inclusion? What's your definition, I should say, Courtney?
Yeah, well, I think diversity and inclusion really is around making sure that everyone sees themselves in your messaging. They see themselves in your organization and they feel cared about. I say in my book, when people, they won't buy if they don't identify. And that's so true. If you don't see yourself in the messaging, if you don't see yourself in the commercial, if you don't hear and feel connected, then you won't buy. You don't identify. And so when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's really all about making sure that there's equal access, there's equal opportunity, and that people really feel connected and people feel that you actually care about them and you're concerned about their overall well-being. And I think now more than ever before, we're seeing that there's this shift that's happening towards that. And I do really believe that it's here to stay.
Yeah, it's a lot like as we started off this morning with you on the Starbucks situation, the brands, the cancel culture. Folks are just not standing for it anymore, it seems. You've seen the shift. What must happen next to keep the ball rolling in the right direction?
We have to hold brands accountable. Like, we absolutely have to continue, and brands are aware that cancel culture is a thing. And so I think that as long as we hold brands accountable, brands that have said, hey, we're going to make that, we're setting aside X amount of millions to diverse businesses or Black owned businesses. And I think that also needs to be identified when we're talking about diverse companies that are focusing on companies that have publicly said, and there's a ton of them, I'm keeping a list of them myself, that have mentioned we're setting aside 500 million, 800 million, $1 billion towards Black owned businesses, holding them accountable, asking and requiring them to show, hey, what did you do? This has been a year since you've announced this, and we're actually doing the work, and saying, hey, X company, you made this statement a year ago today. What progress has been made? So I think that that's going to be key, and really making sure that if brands don't do what they say they're going to do, we hold them accountable by taking away our buying power and putting it towards brands that actually do what they say they will.
Yeah, Dr. Chavis?
Yes, Courtney, before we end, I do want to ask you, I think it would be very helpful, particularly to our publishers around the country. What would you recommend to the Black press? Should we start covering the issue of DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion more in our papers, in our media, our social media channels? Because I think a lot of the transparency and accountability that you talk about for corporate America, you'd be surprised, Courtney, a lot of those companies still do not advertise with Black-owned newspapers, with Black-owned media companies, Black-owned social channels. How can we get, from your perspective, those Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies to practice what they're preaching, to follow their corporate social responsibility statements, but to put it into action?
Well, I think two things. I think the first thing is there's power in numbers. So I think that by making sure that you can show and say, hey, this is the reach that we have, because at the end of the day, the companies really still want to be able to have it be not just a feel good, but for business growth. So by showing this is our reach, these are the people who we can get you in front of. And companies are doing influencer marketing. Influencer marketing is nothing new. But what we are seeing is that these big brands are going niche, and they're saying, okay, we want to actually work with influencers, whether that comes in the form of a person or that comes in the form of an organization that can really help us build affinity with Black and multicultural audiences. Mm-hmm. So I think that by showing the power of Black media altogether is going to be definitely a shift that can happen, and that would do good. And when I say do good, it'll be good for the business case and getting those ad dollars, but it'll also be good because they can also build that brand affinity that they're looking for.
Absolutely. Diversity, equity, inclusion is good for business.
It
It's just
is.
not the right thing to do from a morality perspective, but it is actually, I think Courtney, that the companies that have embraced DEI fully, their profit margins have expanded. So it's good for business.
It's great for business. It's great for business. And then I would say the second thing, Dr. Chavis, is to really make sure that as we promote or as we look for ad dollars and things like that, I think it's really important to promote Black-owned businesses. I think that that really is going to be something that is going to help Black businesses grow, and really be able to show that just for pure inspiration, and then also for those innovations and showing, hey, as we grow, this is what we're doing. This is how we're helping our community. This is how we're actually putting our time, our focus where we can have the greatest impact. So I think those two things together is really going to allow these bigger brands the opportunity and a snapshot of how it would help them and how it helped their business growth and help them build affinity with Black audiences by supporting and using that ad spend to Black press.
Yeah,
Great.
absolutely. And Courtney, you're so enthusiastic. You're just a breath of fresh air. But you made it so far, like others. You talked about Black businesses. You made it through the pandemic to this point. We know it's been difficult for all Black businesses. But what's your message today, as we are more than a year into the pandemic? Things kind of looking up a little bit. But what is your message today to Black-owned businesses?
I think the message is that you really have to make sure that you have relationship with your customers. The one of the biggest things that was so disheartening, and I worked with a lot of small Black-owned businesses last year to help them recharge and pivot their businesses. And what I found was that a lot of businesses didn't have actual relationships database, a way to connect with their customers. So I think that going digital is not just a option. It's not something you can ignore anymore. I think that that's super important. And I think that it's important to make sure that you have an open line of communication with those customers, making sure that you put them in a Facebook group, you have an email database, you have some way to connect with them and some way to really hear them as opposed to just talk to them, but talk with them.
Wow. Courtney Newell, Crown Marketing and Communications. It is a privilege to have you on. Dr. Chavis, I'll give you a minute for your closing thought.
Well, again, I'm just listening to Courtney's brilliance, her effectiveness and her leadership, and your success in the marketplace. The Biden-Harris administration, I'll close on this point, has announced that equity is its top value proposition for all the federal government agencies and for all the public policies that are now being developed. The president's multi-trillion-dollar stimulus plan. Ambassador Susan Rice has been named so the equities are for public policy and for equity inclusion in the White House. It seems to me, Courtney, that your company can also probably help the Biden-Harris administration as they charge out to get more accountability, to get more readiness in the marketplace for the transition, for the pivot toward more diversity and inclusion. So are you getting any federal contracts for your business?
Well, right now we do work with some government agencies. We're mostly private sector, but we do plan to be a part of that, movement with the Biden-Harris administration, hopefully.
Fantastic.
Very good. Well, we wish you all the best. And one of the reasons why we have business leaders like you on our show, we want to encourage more African Americans, women, young people, and men to go into the business sector and to do for self. And you certainly created a crown for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, I love that. Thanks so much, Dr. Chavis.
And don't forget to register for the upcoming National Newspaper Publicists Association's virtual convention, which takes place from June 23rd to June 26th. It's free to register thanks to Dr. Chavis, our chair, Karen Carter-Richards, and the executive team of the NNPA. This year's conference is free and lots of great stuff, lots of surprises coming. virtualnnpa2021.com. Register today. Don't wait. And don't forget this afternoon, 2:15, the White House COVID-19 Health Equity Task Force members, Dr. Marcella Nunez-Smith and Dr. Cameron Webb, will speak exclusively to the Black Press of America right here on these same channels at 2:15 today. Tomorrow, join us for actor Javon Johnson. He will join us. Let it be known, perseverance is not a long race. It is many short races, one after the other. We will see you tomorrow.